Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. I'm joined at a very busy CPHI Milan by Joerg Ahlgrimm, who's the CEO of SK pharmteco. It's been an incredibly busy time for SK. It seems like on PharmaSource, every day we're publishing new news of yours, whether that's with an acquisition or a new partnership. So I'd really like to understand a bit more about the overall strategy and how that's coming together. But before we jump into that, if you wouldn't mind, I'm quite keen to hear about your journey from Lonza to the Centre for Breakthrough Medicines. Please tell us about your journey.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. So it's great to be here. My journey actually started even before the days in Lonza. So I actually started my work life at the innovator companies, first 20 years roughly. First I worked for Schering in Germany. At that time was a small molecule drug product facility where I had the opportunity to really learn everything about pharmaceutical manufacturing because I was a project manager for the plant manager. So it was a really helpful first role in life. Then I moved to Baxter in Austria, one of the large medical device companies, but at that time had a large biologics division. So a lot of supply chain activity at the time, lots of plasma fractionation. I moved to the United States, took over the supply chain for Baxter Bioscience operations. And then Baxter split into Baxter and remained as Baxter. I was part of Baxter, had their manufacturing network, and Baxter was acquired by Schering. At that moment I decided to move on, got to know Lonza, joined Lonza, moved to Basel, led Lonza's operations through 4 years of unprecedented growth, led 35 facilities, and then I thought, what's next?
Yeah.
And what came next was a startup in Philadelphia.
So was it a phone call from Audrey? How did that start?
Actually, it was a phone call from the other founder, which is Brian O'Neill, who called me very late at European time because he doesn't necessarily appreciate the fact that there's a time difference between Europe and the United States. And basically he said, do you want to join us to build the largest CDMO in the world? And I said, well, why not? At that time things in Lonza were a little interesting. Many CEO changes and things, and so it was a good time to make a move. The pandemic had not yet started, but the pandemic became a little bit of a hurdle, which we had to overcome for me to actually go back into the United States. Which actually didn't happen in September 2020, and I was at that time employee number 4, Centre for Breakthrough Medicine, and we built the whole damn thing from scratch.
Yeah, and I guess with that coming some advantages. One of the things which CBM is known for is building digitization right into the centre of the facility from the start, which is fairly unique.
Yeah, we brought together very good experienced people from a variety of different companies out of the industry, and the good mix of innovator companies and CDMO experience. And the first thing we all decided is, let's just not repeat the mistakes we had made in our old companies. So, and that already started us up with, okay, what's our digital infrastructure? How do we go about this? How do we automate from scratch? And that's how we, let's say, carefully build and crafted, Centre for Breakthrough Medicine. Did we get everything right? Probably not. But we are actually pretty proud of what we have been building. And we were able to convince a pretty significant investor of that, which is SK ultimately.
Yes. And now, so being acquired, being part of the wider SK family, the second largest company in South Korea?
Yes.
Must be a big change. What's the overall strategy now? What's the overall approach for growth of the combined company?
For me personally, it's kind of back home, right? I was always part of large companies, so it was actually a pretty convenient move. And then keep in mind, what actually is interesting in the situation is that before SK actually acquired majority of CBM, we had minority interests. And at that time, I actually moved out of CBM, left my role there, became the CEO of SK pharmteco, so that the acquisition of CBM basically now means that I'm integrating my old company into my new company, which is kind of an interesting twist in many different ways. So, but to your question, I think, of course, for many team members, there are things changing. So, we are building more global processes. There's a bit more alignment to be done. Some things appear sometimes to move a little slower, even though we try to maintain our, call it, speedboat mentality while building, I guess, a large, cruise ship to some extent. And but overall, I think everybody is buying into our vision of building a large, multinational, multi-modality CDMO. So we strongly believe that the CDMO industry is in front of a bit of a consolidation.
Yep.
And if you fast forward 10 years, there are probably 10, 15 large multi-modality CDMOs. And a lot of the smaller ones, highly specialized ones, they may still, some exist in existence, but most of them will probably be bought or die down. We also see that the majority of the customer base, especially the mid and large size biopharma companies, they don't want to manage any more networks of 15, 20, 30, 50 CDMOs. They want to consolidate. And they want to consolidate with partners which know how to work on ESG, which know how to help them reducing their carbon footprint, where suppliers are usually the bigger portion of your carbon footprint than you are typically yourself, which know how to digitalize and make outsourcing easy. And that's kind of a theme we have in SK pharmteco. Make it easy to work with us. Outsourcing should not be your second best option. It should be your first best option. And the way we build SK pharmteco is we really build all our processes and systems in a way that it's easy to do work with us. So from a specialization point of view, we have been starting as an API manufacturer on the small molecule side. We have significantly invested into the cell and gene side with facilities in Europe and the United States, while we have small molecules in the United States, Europe and Asia. And now we are building out a little bit the white space in between. So we have decided to go into oligonucleotide. The most recent announcement you probably just referred to is an investment in Korea, which also gives us a capability in the peptide space. So we start out basically to fill out the white space in between small molecule and cell and gene, and those are roughly the modalities with which we want to grow the company over the next few years and create significant value and benefits for our clients and become really an end-to-end supplier in those areas.
Fascinating. Thank you. So talking about making outsourcing easy, when you're being built partly through organic growth but partly through acquisition, how do you join the gaps between all the different facilities and the different business units? What does that look like to make a seamless journey for the customer?
Well, it has to start with things like one common global quality system, and not just on paper, but also in terms of what your culture is, in terms of what your philosophy is, and how do you translate those things into daily practicalities. So global quality is one thing. Overall, I think it's very important that the organization itself is joined under one vision, under one mission, shares the same values as a foundation basically for everything we do. You want to harmonize, over time at least. A lot of what I'm talking about, we are in the process of doing, right? I'm in the job now a bit more than a year, so it takes a little bit of time to get all of these things done. Joint IT systems, a digital philosophy, and digitalization philosophy, which is aligning the different facilities as much as necessary, but not as much as possible.
So what you did at CBM on the digital side, rolling that out across other facilities?
Where it makes sense. So the quality management system, yes. The MES system, for example, most likely not, because that seems something which eventually has to be bespoke between the different modalities. And what works for cell and gene may not work for small molecule API manufacturing. So you have to do this with some good thinking and some practical approaches. We are not there to align or bring everything together, but what makes sense and what gives a benefit for the client, that's all the things which we are focusing on. In terms of how we, let's say, train our program managers to work with the clients, in terms of how we craft, if you will, our philosophy. So we want to be known as a CDMO who is not just executing an SOW. And if it works well, it's great. If it doesn't work well, it's the client's fault. So we want to make sure that the expertise we bring, and given the amount of programs we see, we typically have more expertise than many clients, right? Because we just see way more stuff going right and wrong. And we should always be able to bring something to the table, and we definitely want to do that. We want to make sure that our clients understand early on how we think about this program. We don't want to price ourselves into a contract and then change order ourselves into profitability. So we want to make sure that.
And is that something that is happening at the moment? Would you say, as a deliberate pricing strategy?
I believe it's happening in the industry. It's really not what we try to do, and sometimes we lose business because of that. Because what looks cheap is sometimes what people fall for. But I think what's very important is to really understand what is the status of the process right now. What do we believe is the right effort in order to bring it to a commercializable process, for example, if that's the task. And be very transparent with the client on how we think this needs to be done, because I think that's why people come to us. They don't come to us for necessarily just capacity, but they come to us for decades of experience, and we will always be here to recommend how we would go about things.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned that over the next 10 to 15 years, it's a space which you see consolidating, and obviously SK being one of the driving forces within that. Recently, your 60% stake in IDT Biologics, albeit a different part of SK, was announced. What are you able to say about M&A in terms of where you're, probably not specific deals, but where you're aiming to get to? Do you have public targets you're committed to?
Yeah, so we actually have right now a very strong balance sheet as it comes to financing and funding our organic growth. So let's start with that. All our facilities have space to grow. So, and we believe that we can achieve our 5-year predictions to grow the company by 2 to 3-fold within the existing 4 walls in a broader sense. Okay. So by building adding brownfield facilities to our existing sites, or utilizing capacity we already have in place to the fullest.
Great.
And building things like the next plant on the site in Korea. So those are the things we are pursuing. We will go for for M&A, but primarily in order to augment our capabilities, things which we just don't have. So one thing we are looking for example, is do we buy something in the very early stage, the early development area for small molecules? We are very much a phase 2, phase 3 commercialization shop. We are known for that. We do preclinical work, but we don't do it as a standard offering. Okay, so but I believe that we must offer this for our clients, and that people do not want to do any transfers anymore. So we want to do and increase our capabilities and capacities for the early stage development. That's something where we would buy something.
So to use that horrible acronym as CRDMO potentially.
Basically, even though for me that's more the D. So we are not planning any larger acquisitions, in a super transformational way, because number one, we believe that the growth we can achieve organically is pretty much putting us, in line with many of the folks we aspire to be mentioned with, and two, I think right now the market is also, in my eyes, not necessarily something where I would go out and raise additional money. So I would right now keep the money we collected last year and use that to build out the businesses we have on the locations we have. So, but if something comes along in a opportunistic way, we are always looking and assessing everything. But we are ourselves right now not necessarily going out and scout.
Yes.
So we are reviewing the stuff which comes to us. But our key focus is basically an organic growth strategy within the existing 4 walls.
Yeah, great, thank you. The Biosecure Act is obviously making a lot of noise stateside. Is that something which you're seeing an impact on yourselves, positively or negatively, in terms of new business?
Yeah, so we definitely see it right now in the form of more requests coming to us, where people like to explore what it would look like to move away from their current supply base. Sure. So what we haven't yet seen is a lot of business being actually signed in that regard. But okay, it has to start somewhere. So yes, we see a positive impact. I personally believe that it's a bit of a mixed feeling thing, because from an industry point of view, let's be honest, I think many of the suppliers in China have kept the Western suppliers on their toes. Competition is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And
certainly in terms of pricing.
Pricing, but also in terms of what I think is for many companies more important than pricing, which is on-time delivery and good quality, I guess. So I think this Biosecure Act in some form or fashion will come. How it exactly will then impact supply chain decisions will, in my eyes, depend a lot on where in the process companies are. I think it's now discussed to have a kind of a transition period for the next 8 years or so. Last time I saw. So I think we just have to play it by ear. We will definitely look to increase our capacities primarily in the early stage development space, because that's something, especially on a small molecule, where a lot of business and projects went to Chinese suppliers in the past, and we don't have enough capacity here to actually be able to meet the expected increased demands. While on the cell and gene side, we would right now be able to meet additional demands, which I think is a good thing. So we'll have to just see how it actually unfolds. But we believe that not just because of Biosecure, but also because of war in the Ukraine, war in the Middle East, other geopolitical topics, what we saw in terms of some safety challenges we had in some Indian facilities recently. I think we will, right, wrong, or indifferent, see over the next years kind of a reorientation towards, call it the home market.
Okay.
European companies would like to be, again, a little bit more in Europe, US companies a bit more in the US. And what we have seen in the last 20 years, which was a lot of super globalization, goes a little bit more back towards, in our view, towards more regional, situations. So that's, I think, what will happen.
Interesting. Something I'm asking everyone over the next few days at CPHI is just to sort of check where the pulse of how you feel the industry is at the moment, because obviously there's so much upheaval over the COVID period. Do you feel as though investments coming back? Do you feel like new projects are coming back? How's 2025 looking for you?
So we are very bullish about 2025. For us, 2023, like for many other CDMOs, was the post-COVID year, and through that, we had some challenges. 24 brings us back to growth. 25, the growth in our view will be accelerating. But again, whoever had a lot of fun during COVID has, I think, a lot of challenges after COVID.
They're at the other end of the
Absolutely.
roller coaster.
So, but I think we get through that one. Overall, on the small molecule side, we are seeing that the dip, which was created by slowdown of clinical trials, starts to be that gap starts to get closed, and we see more programs now resuming, so to speak, or clinical trials accelerating, and through that more phase 3 and commercialization things coming in. On the cell and gene side, we actually believe that some of what happened during COVID and during the financial challenges will help cell and gene in the long run, because most companies had to focus on their most promising programs, which means what we will now see in the next few years, if they did their job well, are a higher clinical success rate and potentially a higher commercial success rate, because if they focus on one thing, they better focus on the programs which they assume the higher clinical chance, and they assume a larger commercial capability. We have seen definitely a significant increase in approvals. Yes. We have seen that in small molecules last year, but also in cell and gene. For specifically cell and gene, we probably now expect every year like a doubling or at least 50% increase in new approvals. I think we see a good mix result when it comes to commercial success, right? A lot of the CAR Ts finally now become successful, but some of the viral vectors or gene therapies are, hemophilia doesn't go that well, it seems. Wherever the standard of care seems to already be very good, people seem to be reluctant to move to a gene therapy. But wherever this is not the case, looks like the gene therapy goes well. So we see some launches which actually meet their targets. And I think that will continue to fuel financing floating into the industry. So I think in cell and gene it goes slower than we hoped, but it is definitely coming back, and in 2025 we expect continued growth in that area.
Fantastic. Well, Joerg, thank you so much for your time. It's a fascinating overview on the market and an exciting time for SK, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.
To keep up to date with the latest in biopharma outsourcing, sign up to pharmasource.global. Thank you for listening.